Opera buffa is a genre of opera. It was first used as an informal description of Italian comic operas variously classified by their authors as commedia in musica, commedia per musica, dramma bernesco, dramma comico, divertimento giocoso. Especially associated with developments in Naples in the first half of the 18th century, whence its popularity spread to Rome and northern Italy, buffa was at first characterized by everyday settings, local dialects, and simple vocal writing, the main requirement being clear diction and facility with patter. The New Grove Dictionary of Opera considers La Silla and Luigi and Federico Ricci's Crispino e la Commedia to be the first and last appearances of the genre, although the term is still occasionally applied to newer work. High points in this history are the 80 or so libretti by Carlindo Grollo, Loren Guiducci, Sogol Cardoni and various other approximate anagrams of Carlo Goldoni, the 3 Mozart da Ponte collaborations, and the comedies of Gioacchino Rossini. Similar foreign genres such as opera copyright ra comico or singspiel differed as well in having spoken dialogue in place of recitativo secco, although one of the most influential examples, Pergolesi's La Serva Padrona, sparked the Choral des Buffons in Paris as an adaptation without sung recitatives. History: comic characters had been a part of opera until the early 18th century, when opera buffa began to emerge as a separate genre. Opera buffa was a parallel development to opera seria and arose in reaction to the so-called First Reform of Zeno and Metastasio. It was, in part, intended as a genre that the common man could relate to more easily. Whereas opera seria was an entertainment that was both made for and depicted kings and nobility, opera buffa was made for and depicted common people with more common problems. High-flown language was generally avoided in favor of dialogue that the lower class would relate to, often in the local dialect, and the stock characters were often derived from those of the Italian commedia dell'arte. In the early 18th century, comic operas often appeared as short, one-act interludes known as intermezzi that were performed in between acts of opera seria. These gave way to the full-fledged opera buffa later in the 18th century. La Serva Padrona by Giovanni Battista Pergolesi, is the one intermezzo still performed with any regularity today, and provides an excellent example of the style. Apart from Pergolesi, the first major composers of opera buffa were Nicola Logrossino, Baldassare Galuppi and Alessandro Scarlatti, all of them based in Naples or Venice. The opera buffa's importance diminished during the Romantic period. Here, the forms were freer and less extended than in the serious genre and the set numbers were linked by recitativo secco, the exception being Donizetti's Don Pasquale in 1843. With Rossini, a standard distribution of 4 characters is reached, a prima donna soubrette, a light, amorous tenor, a basso cantante or baritone capable of lyrical, mostly ironical expression, and a basso buffo whose vocal skills, largely confined to clear articulation and the ability to patter, must also extend to the baritone for the purposes of comic duets. The type of comedy could vary, and the range was great, from Rossini's The Barber of Seville in 1816 which was purely comedic, to Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro in 1786 which added drama and pathos. Another example of romantic opera buffa would be Donizetti's L'Alcide d'Amore of 1832. Relation to indifferences from opera seria: while opera seria deals with gods and ancient heroes and only occasionally contained comic scenes, opera buffa involves the predominant use of comic scenes, characters, and plot lines in a contemporary setting. The traditional model for opera seria had 3 acts, dealt with serious subjects in mythical settings, as stated above, and used high voices for principal characters, often even for monarchs. In contrast, the model that generally held for opera buffa was having 2 acts, presenting comic scenes and situations as earlier stated and using the lower male voices to the exclusion of the castrati. This led to the creation of the characteristic basso buffo, a specialist in patter who was the center of most of the comic action. References, notes. Sources: Eisen, Cliff, al. Mozart in Grove Music Online, Oxford Music Online Section 7 €10. November 18, 2009, Fisher, Burton D., The Barber of Seville. Grand Rapids, Opera Journeys, 2005. Grout, Donald. A Short History of Opera. New York, Columbia University Press, 1965. Hunter, Mary, The Culture of Opera Buffa in Mozart's Vienna, A Poetics of Entertainment. Princeton University Press, Princeton, New Jersey, 1999 pg. 160 euro 162. Opera Buffa. World Book Online Reference Center. 2008. February 3, 2008, Parker, Roger, The Oxford Illustrated History of Opera, Platoff, John. How Original Was Mozart? Evidence from Opera Buffa. Early Music, Volume 20 No. 1. Oxford University Press, February 1992. pg 105 euro 117. Weiss, Piero. Julian Budden, Opera Buffa, Grove Music Online. Oxford Music Online. December 4, 2009, Webster, James, Hunter, Mary. Opera Buffa in Mozart's Vienna. Cambridge University Press, Cambridge, England 1997 pg. 138 euro 140. Weiss, Piero and Budden, Julian. Opera Buffa in the New Grove Dictionary of Opera, ed. Stanley Sadie, London. ISBN 0-333-73432-7.